This is gonna be long, but you already know that, don't you? Hello, everybody. How's everyone doing? I hope everyone is doing just fine or better. I'm good myself, thank you. So I was checking out my man Franco's, Mr. Silva's Recognize the Matrix's video about Anthony Joshua saying in a private message that he believes that black people are the superior race. Something to that effect, right? We all know the deal. And after I had listened to Mr. Silva's video, you know, I basically agreed with everything he had to say. And in the suggested area, I saw Mr. Boxing Wave. Now, had it been someone like Blood Boxing or 78, I wouldn't even bother to click on it these days because those guys are lost souls, man. They're in too deep. There is no rescuing them, man. Boxing Wave, on the other hand, I've listened to some of his videos and boxing videos, and he always seemed like a calm, cool, and more rational kind of a guy, right? I learned otherwise eventually as he started talking about politics and social issues a little bit. I recognized what the problem was, and that's part of the reason why I also clicked on the video because both of those reasons, right? Because I believe he's someone who's still on the brink, and it's not too far to put him on the right path. Look at me, the Messiah. What did Blood Boxing call me one time? Captain Save-A-Hole. That's so rude, Blood. That's just so rude. Anyway, all jokes aside, I suppose I could respond to Mr. Silva, but seeing as I agree with what he said, most what he said, if not everything he said, that might be a little bit boring to just sit there agreeing. I always find it more interesting, if only because of the contrast, which makes things pop, if you think about it, to disagree with someone and have a debate or a conversation. So without any further ado, let's get this shit popping, right? The contrast. And look. I've offered Boxing Wave a chance to talk to me in the past, and he vehemently denied it. I wanted to talk to him about facts and reality when it came to Alexander Povetkin, and he vehemently refused to do that and called me a racist, right? I wasn't worth his time because I was a racist in his opinion. Because I was speaking truth and fact about the Alexander Povetkin Meldonium case, right? That right then and there I realized that this brother's he's not on a righteous path, man. He's going down the wrong path, and maybe it's not too late to turn him straight because he seems to be at a crossroads. But maybe we'll get to that. Anyway, contrast. Let's get this shit popping.
Now, I personally take it like this. A lot of people call him racist, alright? And the reason why I'm doing this video is because I knew
personally. He's talking about himself as an individual. It's important to notice. I'm going to do a little bit of body language and I don't know, diction, I guess, analysis, body language mostly, I guess. And then I'm going to stop because I hope that you'll start noticing these things on your own. But look and listen.
I do follow him on
Instagram. Look, I'm not trying to be a dick or anything. I genuinely find this amusing.
Because I knew about it, but I do follow him on Instagram.
Which is it, right? I could be completely off here, but the way he struggled to tell us how he found out about the situation of Anthony Joshua. He jumped from one scenario to another without really quite finishing any thought. He finally, I feel like he was about to lie to us, but then fessed up. Right? Listen to it again.
And I knew about it, but I happened to this, all right? And the reason why I'm doing this video is because I knew about it, but I happened to doing this video
Notice how his voice cracks.
because I knew about it, but I happen to I do follow him on Instagram.
All right. Well, he was gonna go down the wrong path, right? But then he turned right. He turned straight. He told it. He told the truth, right?
And I seen him make a post today, and I just so happened to read the comments, and I'm seeing the type of people that are calling him racist.
He just so happen to read the comments. I want you to look at how he says that he's gonna say the type of people and the kind of people. I want you to pay attention to how he says it. Look at his eyes too.
Comments, and I'm seeing the type of people that are calling him racist.
His eyes went up, right? Kind of almost rolled in the back of his head when he said type, and now before he says kind, he's gonna do the same thing.
I see a lot of people are attacking him. I see what kind of people they are. There are a lot of
What kind of people they are, right? He's about to judge somebody, ain't he?
white people calling him racist.
Wait a minute. As far as being precise, white race is not really the kind of person you are, the kind of people you are. Race is who you are, right? Or is it? Maybe he confuses the two. Maybe he has some prejudices about white people, right? He doesn't say who, he just immediately judges them. When you say the kind of person someone is, you're making a value judgment about their character, right? You're not telling us what their skin color is, the type of person that they are. You're not telling us who they are racially. You're making a moral value judgment about the character of the person.
Specifically, all I saw was people that are. There's a lot of people who are just leaving normal comments, but the people that are attacking him and calling him a racist are white. Specifically.
Okay. So not only did he judge these people, he also tells you that he can identify a person's race just by looking at their Instagram account, right? And he just so happened to identify all these white people, right? It's just what he saw. He's an expert. He could just look at a person and he knows what race they are, right? And if you doubt that, look at all the pieces of paper on the wall, framed.
Now, this is how I see it. He didn't single out a specific race when he said, my race is the superior race.
At a very basic, fundamental level, right? Does that statement make any sense? He didn't single out any specific race when he said, my race are the superior race, right? Of course he singled out. I know what he's trying to say here, but read between the lines, right? It's fundamentally, it doesn't make any sense. It can't make any sense, because if you start making sense, you'll realize that your ideology is bullshit.
Okay, our race is a superior race. You're a disgrace to the superior race. Okay, he didn't single out a specific race or any ethnic group of people. Okay, he's talking about his people.
Again, he did single them out, but it was in a positive context, right? He gave props to his people. As far as what would be considered a negative context, he didn't. What Boxing Wave is saying is that he didn't insult anybody. He just gave props to black people, right? That's what he's saying.
All right, he's saying that we are the superior race. Okay, he didn't say over white people. He didn't say over Asian people. He didn't say over Hispanics.
No, he didn't explicitly say or single out any single group of people in saying anything negative about them explicitly, but what's implied in superiority, if you say that you are superior, that there's someone who's inferior, right? Because you can't be superior. Who are you superior to, right? All the inferior people. So if black is the superior race, well, just using logic and reason, what that means, what that statement means, is that all the other races are inferior. And that's a fact that we don't need to run away from. I think we need to acknowledge. If you want to understand what the problem is, you need to acknowledge the facts.
Say over anyone specifically, but a lot of the people.
Not over anyone specifically, right? Just everybody else. So in his opinion, in this case, it would be worse to single out a smaller group of people than to lump a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of different groups together as at the bottom of the totem pole, right? Totem pole, as the inferiors. Somehow he's trying to convince himself and you that it would be more okay to insult, or that it would be worse actually to insult a smaller group of people than the larger group of people. And that just doesn't make any sense, right? Ideologies, they don't make sense, man. People try to twist reality to make their belief system scientific. And it ain't. It's never going to be.
That are outraged right now are white people because that's how it is. It's always black and white.
Oh, he's so resentful, right? And upset. He's a resentful person.
It just so happens to always be black.
And of course, it doesn't just so happen. We all know why it does. But maybe for the sake of the argument and the brevity of the monologue, he just doesn't feel like getting into it. And that's okay. But we all know why.
And white. Now, if you're watching this video and you're looking at me and you're saying, well, this double standard. What if a black fighter or what if a white fighter were to say that there's a superior race? Black people will be outraged. I know you're looking at this video and saying, looking at me being a black man, and you're saying that to yourself. I understand that. Yeah, a lot of black people would be outraged.
So he acknowledges that, right? That if a white person were to do the same thing, a whole bunch of black people would be outraged. He acknowledges it, right? But he doesn't think white people should be outraged, even though he acknowledges that black people would be outraged. Now, what kind of sense does that make? Right? But then he jumps and says, what?
outraged. And yeah, a lot of black people would be outraged. I'm not outraged.
Okay, but we're talking about groups here. We're talking about collectives. We're not talking about individuals, right? You decided to become part of this mythical black race. And this is a race issue. This isn't an individual issue. This is a race issue. And you just acknowledged that black people as a group would have a problem with the white person doing that. But because you as an individual don't have a black individual, tell us, I don't know if it's true or not, but you're telling us that you don't have a problem with that. That's supposed to somehow matter when we're not talking about you. You've externalized your individuality when you decided to become part of this group, right? You can't conveniently, for the sake of your non-existent argument, let's be real, jump around from group identity and individual identity and confuse the two, right? What are we talking about here? We're talking about racism. We're talking about groups, not individuals. But you could see how confused and perplexed he is himself. And maybe this is cognitive dissonance. Maybe on some level he understands that his ideology is bullshit, right? Because he assumed this ideology of his race and racism, they're one and the same. But now he's rejecting it, right? This is a result of hardcore Western civilization building values, right? And the concentration and respect of the individual. Struggling, fighting against collectivism or Marxism.
I mean, if you haven't got that at this point, I don't think there's anything wrong with the comment. First of all, I don't even know.
So there's nothing wrong with the comment, he says, right? Now, which means he agrees with the comment, with the statement, right? Because if it's not a true statement, that there's something wrong with it, right? Look, I'm not so much interested. I understand that that's how people view the world, but I'm not so much interested in making value judgments or getting mad at people as I am in communicating and getting to the bottom of it and speaking the truth, because that's the only way we're going to get to the bottom of this, right? And clearly he wants to, he's reaching out, right, making this video, so he does seem to want to communicate. So let's just listen.
What was the point of him saying that? You know, what was? I'm not outraged. I mean, if you haven't got that at this point, I don't think there's anything wrong with the comment.
So he says there's nothing wrong with the comment, meaning he agrees with it, right? Meaning he holds the same ideology, right? Because if again, if it wasn't a true comment, there would be something wrong with it. But because he doesn't see anything wrong with it, he believes that to be true, that black people are superior. He holds the same ideology, right? He is a racist just like Anthony and Joshua. And I'm not making a value judgment here. I'm just sticking to reason, logic, and established norms and definitions of words that we all like to use. I'm just being very fundamentally sound here. You know what I mean?
First of all, I don't even know what was the point of him saying that. I don't know. Maybe he is racist. I don't think he is. There's nothing about him that would make me think he's racist. So I don't think he's racist. I don't
You guys know Smugly Puff? It kind of reminds me of Smugly Puff.
know. Maybe he is racist. I don't think he is. There's nothing about him that would make me think he's racist. So I don't think he's racist. I don't think he was being racist. I think he was being prideful.
Turn that hat yellow and Smugly Puff. So he's not being racist, he's being prideful. But however you define pride, and we'll get to that, are these polar opposites? Are they contrary to one another? Pride and racism, or do they go hand in hand?
I have no problem with a man being prideful. He didn't call white people any racial slurs or say anything bad about white people. He didn't say anything bad about Asian people.
Okay, so he didn't, it's true, he didn't use any racial slurs. But why are racial slurs so powerful, right? If you call somebody a bitch, that person gets upset. And that's where it stays, right? If you call somebody a nigger, a whole bunch of people get upset, right? So the reason why these words are so vile and and why we don't like them is, well, because we don't like them. But the reason why they're so powerful, these words, is because a whole group of people, not just that one person that's being spoken to, a whole group of people get offended when you use that word in a certain context, right? So let's continue.
He didn't say anything about Hispanics or Middle Easterns or whatever. He didn't say anything bad about a specific group.
No, he said something what would be considered bad, whether it is or isn't, is not really important. What's important is whether or not it's true. But if you, that's how you want to frame the conversation. No, he didn't say anything bad about anybody specifically. He said something bad about everyone that's not black, and not explicitly. Obviously, it's implied again in the statement of black superiority, because you can't be superior without a whole bunch of inferiors around you, right? It's racial superiority by definition. That's, or belief in it, is an ideology that's called racism, right? And again, the reason why words spoken to individuals are so powerful is because of this group identity, and because a whole bunch of people get offended. Okay, so here again you see this confusion and struggle between the individual and the collective mentality just taken over. You know what I mean? And the failure to recognize that.
Yet people are outraged. I think it was a prideful statement, and I have no problem with it. If you're white and you said that about you and your people, whether you're white or whatever, if you're Irish or whatever it is you are, if you believe that about your people, I have no problem with it. I've never had a problem with it. You know why I don't have a problem with it?
So this sort of ideology is exactly in line with cultural Marxism. And if you want to learn more about this stuff, there's a brilliant man, and I know a lot of you already know about Jordan B. Peterson, but look his name up and put postmodernism next to it. And if your mind's not blown by what that man has to say, then I can't help you. But anyway, one of the tenets, or maybe not tenets, but one of the ways postmodernism works, according to Jordan B. Peterson, is that it provides an infinite number of solutions, equally as valid solutions to a problem, right? Or you could take a work of art or a book and you could interpret it in an infinite number of ways, and they're all just as valid as one another. It's this idea that everyone's opinion is equally valid. You know what I mean? It's this idea that we're all created equal, and it transcends this basic characterization of a problem with infinite equally legitimate solutions, but that's how it's manifested, right? You see the same thing happening when it comes to gender identity, right? There are all these genders, and they're constantly coming up with new genders, right? We have this problem apparently. People don't know who they are, right? And so we give them an infinite number of solutions. So the way that applies here is that he believes that black people are superior. But if you believe that white people are superior, then he got no problem with that either. That's also true. So it's true to him that black people are superior, and it's true to him that white people are superior. Or he doesn't give a flying fuck about truth. Truth just goes out the fucking window, right? I mean, both of them can't exist in the same space at the same time, right? Black people being superior, white people being superior. I mean, that doesn't make any sense, right? But he's trying to tell you that it does. This is postmodernist cultural Marxism. It's some scary fucking shit because it doesn't make any sense. It's just an ideology, and it's swallowing up young, intelligent people, and it's ruining their brains and turning them into fucking mush.
Stuff like this, because I don't think I'm inferior to anyone. That's just me. That's my personality. I've been that way for a very long time. I don't have insecurity issues. Not those kind of insecurity issues. I don't think I'm inferior to no one. There's no one in the world that I would trade my life for.
So he does recognize that what you're saying, he doesn't agree with what you're saying, but he has no problem with it. He doesn't agree with it because he doesn't believe it's true, but he has no problem with it. He's okay with you not speaking the truth because why? Well, probably because he ain't speaking it either. And once again, him not having a problem here is irrelevant because his race that he's decided to become a part of and externalize his individual identity for the sake thereof, his race has a problem, would have a problem, has had a problem with this sort of thing. So once again, it doesn't matter. Once you've externalized your individuality, you can't just conveniently hop in and out of those shoes, man. Pick one. How the hell are we supposed to communicate? How are we supposed to have an intelligent conversation and understand one another when you're constantly moving the goalpost and changing the basic premise?
There's not one person in the world. I don't care how much money they have. I don't care about how they look. I don't care how successful they are. There's no one on this planet that I would trade my life for.
Okay, now is this a valid argument? I mean, it might sound good, right? Like it might sound like it's making sense, but this isn't even a hypothetical scenario. It's an impossible one, right? You can't possibly, in no way, shape, or form, become another person, assume their life. That's just impossible. Now, hypothetically speaking, let's just say that was possible. That would be hypothetical, right? If that were actually possible to you, how the hell do you know how you would feel if that option right now as we speak just doesn't exist? It just doesn't exist. So you can't do it anyway, even if you wanted, and you don't even know if you want or don't, because The option doesn't even exist, right? No one has even presented you with the option because it's impossible to become another person. This is nonsense. This is not an argument. It's drivel.
Now, as far as my race, I don't speak for everybody in my race.
Okay, he doesn't speak for everybody in his race, but that's not actually correct. Just like a few minutes ago, he was telling us about looking at Instagram and seeing, ascertaining, doing a tally, a census that takes people's race into consideration on Instagram, just casually browsing through Instagram, he saw who the people were, right? He categorized these people as white people, and obviously he categorized all these other people as non-white people, perhaps even black people, right? And people do this all the time. They look at somebody and they say what race they are, right? What they think they are. And it just so happens that sometimes some of those people disagree. You might say that someone's black and they'll be like, no, I'm not black. I'm Latino. I'm not black, right? Whatever identity they've assumed, right? So by assuming this racial identity and then showing us the proclivity to judge people based on their Instagram account, who they are, it's safe to assume that you do the same for black people, as you probably already did anyway, as a process of elimination of all these white people. But so indeed you are. That's just the problem with assuming a collectivist ideology. You are speaking for a group of people on some level, at some point. Always. Maybe.
No, I don't think I'm just. When I make that comment, no, I didn't make the comment.
Okay. So he doesn't think there's anything wrong with the comment, but he wouldn't make that comment. Why not? If there's nothing wrong with the comment, meaning you agree with the comment, we went over this, why wouldn't you make that comment yourself? Either because A, you're a coward, or B, you feel empathy because on some level you realize that it would offend a bunch of people. Or C, I don't know if there are any other options. You let me know in the comments section. But once again, he's conflicted. Not only is he confusing his group identity with his identity as an individual, which is the only identity, he's just conflicted. He's completely conflicted.
This is not about what I said. I wouldn't make that comment. I wouldn't say that my race is superior because
Once again, it's not. He wants to be an individual right now, right? So he's going to start pointing out other individuals and talking about individuals.
everybody in my race is not the same person. I know people that are bums that are a disgrace to my race, okay? And I know people that are great examples and I feel that they are, what's the word? I think they are a great image of my race or a great example of my race.
Okay. Fundamentally speaking, again, or looking at this fundamentally, what's an example? Well, it's like an exemplar, right? Let's say you have a whole bunch of pencils. A pen would, and one pen in a group, right? The pen wouldn't be a good representative of the group. I mean, it's still a writing utensil, but the best example of that group, even though a pen would be an okay example, the greatest example would be another pencil. Hopefully one that's similar in length to all other or majority of pencils, kind of similar in shade and all that other good stuff, right? A pen would be an okay example of this group that has a bunch of pencils and a pen in it. Any other, just a pencil would be a good example of that group. A great example would be a pencil that's in many ways similar to the entire group. So, and I don't know what the truth is, but, a great example, just looking at this fundamentally and using language in a very specific and fundamentally sound way, it could just so happen that a great example of the black race, whatever the fuck that is, in America, Could be a bum off the street. It could be. You just don't know, right? But once again, you see this confusion between the group and the individual, right? He's singling out people. He's shunning all the bad people, and he's choosing all the good people as he sees fit.
You know, we have a thing that that's popular now that we say that is called black excellence, and I think there are people who are great examples of what black excellence is. Whatever you define that is.
Okay, he explained the whole concept and kind of redeemed himself there. That makes
Are
sense.
great examples of what black excellence is.
Great examples of black excellence. He qualified a great example. Okay.
Whatever you define that is.
But then the postmodernism creeps in, right? He gives you a concept of black excellence, and the meaning of black excellence is, well, whatever you think it is, right? Infinite number of solutions to one problem.
I just don't think that people should be outraged.
Does that even make any sense? Going back to postmodernism and ideologies, can you have an infinite number of solutions to one problem? Right? Black excellence, really? That's whatever you think it is? Well, I mean, some thug from the ghetto might think that black excellence is robbing people and selling yay. He might think that. You know what I mean?
This. The golden boy thing with the emails and stuff.
Okay, that's completely irrelevant. It has nothing to do with what Anthony Joshua did. And I'm not saying it's not a topic worthy of conversation, but that's not what I want to talk about.
Kind of swept under the rug. You had to.
And there he goes. He's resentful. Once again, he's resentful that it got swept under the rug. And he's using that to justify and excuse Anthony Joshua being a racist.
Address that issue to Golden Boy and stuff. Joshua thing, saying in a private message,
private messages should remain private. That's just what it should be, and But this is the programming, people. I mean, wake the fuck up. This is the programming, the race programming. I mean, Willie Monroe was passing around an email, but he's not a high-profile fighter, so it didn't get out past his Twitter account. But Willie Monroe was passing around the same kind of email he got from somebody, right? You got Deontay Wilder saying that all Russian people are cheaters and thieves, right? He's characterizing negatively a whole race of people, a group of people, a nation of people, right? You got Sergei Kovalev with his monkey T-shirt. You know what I mean? This is the programming, people.
Depending on what culture or what ethnic background you come from, that could be looked at as pride.
See, there's that infinite number of solutions to a problem, and cultural relativism, right? All cultures are created equal, like all opinions are created equal. They're all equally as valid, right? How do you find truth in a word like that, where everything is equally as valid? How do you find truth? Or is it about finding truth?
And I just don't understand. That could be looked at as pride.
It could be looked at as pride. No, it can't. Because pride is a feeling of satisfaction that you get when someone close to you, someone you know, someone in your family, someone you're connected to succeeds or does something well. You feel proud. You feel a certain feeling of satisfaction because you're connected to that person, right? Sometimes quite literally, like you've hugged them, you gave birth to them, you invested in them, money, time, you taught them something. You touched that person, whether physically or whether literally or in a different sense. You are connected to that person. Now, there's no connection between you and let's say a black scientist or a black entrepreneur that you don't know, never met, never, and even if you did meet him, like, what's your connection? You saw him on the street or at a concert or something? You went to his concert? Like, you need something tangible, right? People that you are connected to. You're you're not connected to all these perfect strangers that are of this mythical race that you get to define what it is, even though they might disagree. You're not connected to those people. We need something tangible to be proud. You understand? It's not pride, feeling satisfaction because perfect strangers are doing well because they're the same or similar skin color to you. That's not pride. It might be hubris. I don't know. It might be taking credit for somebody else's achievement. That's what that might be. But it's not pride. You could be proud of yourself as an individual or people who are tangibly connected to you. That's the meaning of pride. Not connection by an ideology.
And I just don't understand why people are being outraged over something like this. You know,
Right? He doesn't understand. He says he doesn't understand why they're being outraged when he said that black people would be or are always are outraged, right? And he doesn't understand. Well, but that is clear. That is obviously clear. He doesn't understand, right? He's not interested in the truth. He's not interested in finding the one true solution because, hey, anything goes, right? Right? And if you reject truth, then you could just bullshit on and you have this excuse of you don't have to take any responsibility, right?
it's just, I get it. I know Anthony Joshua has this image of this being
None of
this
this is
warrior.
relevant. None of
He
this is
said
really
something
relevant.
that was
It's
blatantly
just
inappropriate
fluff.
or anything that comes up
It
to my
doesn't matter
page
what we
because
perceive them
that's,
as.
I don't think it was a bad thing. Because he really did say that and his thing was not hacked. I would like him for him to own up to it. Because I don't think anything was wrong with it.
Right? He doesn't, again, he reiterates, and he thinks Anthony Joshua should own up to it. He doesn't think there's anything wrong with it, right? But he has a problem saying it. But he doesn't think there's anything wrong with it, but he has a problem saying it. Conflicted, completely conflicted.
There are things that are said by athletes or celebrities in general that are much worse than this. Okay? This is not even bad to me.
I mean, again, here we go. Value judgments, right? Like good or bad or whatever. That's not important. What's important is he telling the truth? And even though a lot of people aren't able to articulate it as this and they just get into their feelings, they do counter this argument, right? If say you're talking about black people being superior in sports, a white person might show up and say, look, what about all these great white athletes, right? If you're talking about science, what about all these great white scientists, right? And they start to have a debate and they might propose a different ideology or just at the very least ask you to prove what you believe to be true, right? You can't do it. It's just an ideology. It's not truth. It's not based in truth. It's how you feel. And that's why people are reacting to it because there is something wrong with this statement. It's not a true statement. Now, whether they're able to articulate it as this, well, that's because we're so divided and we don't know what words mean and all these other reasons. We're emotional and blah, 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 blah.
And I don't care. I know you're gonna come at me with the double standard thing. I don't care. I don't care. Me personally, if you're not talking about me or my people in a negative way and just generalizing all of us, I don't have a problem with you.
Again, Anthony Joshua did generalize. Of course he did. Of course he did.
Okay? If you're not calling me
But this guy rejects truth and fact. He's not okay with reality. You know what I mean?
a racial slur, which I get in my comments sometime, I got one yesterday, I had to block somebody else. If you're just not
Oh, welcome to the internet, right?
attacking me or me because I'm black,
Let me just say this. people don't generally attack you because you're black or white or whatever. They attack you because they don't like what you said. And they might use a racial slur because they know it will hurt your feelings. They want to hurt your feelings. It's completely plausible to have a person use what are considered racial slurs by the majority of the people and not be a racist, right? The dictionary doesn't say a racist is someone who uses racial slurs, because racial slurs don't even exist without this race ideology of racism. So you have to define what racism is in order to even create these so-called racial slurs, in at least in the psyche of the people, right? But just because you use racial slurs doesn't mean you're a racist, even though racial slurs are words that are likely to be used by racists. I really hope that makes sense. Look, I don't know, maybe I said this already, but if you call a woman a bitch, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're insulting all women, just that one woman, right? It's a sexist slur, whatever that means. And it really isn't, because a bitch is just a female. Female dog, that's a bit. I mean, I guess that's insulting, but it really just means a woman. And people really use it to hurt someone's feelings and not a whole group of people, or to characterize a whole group of people. They just want to hurt your feelings. So they're not really, I'm not saying some people don't, but people don't generally attack you for the color of your skin. They just use that as a weakness because they know you've assumed this alternate fake reality, this ideology. And they know that it's going to hurt your feelings, which is why you block them, right?
I really don't care if you feel that you think you're superior, or you think you're superior because of your race, all right? In whatever way that means. I don't even know. We don't even know what he's talking.
Again, he doesn't care if you think that you're superior, because he thinks he is superior. And both of these solutions can somehow exist in this alternate fucking universe of ideology and cultural Marxism. Two MCs can't occupy the same space at the same time. It's against the laws of physics, right? Both of these, look, we have to parse truths, man. We have to get a grip on reality. We have to come to an understanding, right? We have to agree on something. And what's better to agree on than the fucking truth? That's something that everybody can agree on, the truth. Not all these ideologies. How about we just find the common ground, right?
I don't know if he's talking about being an athlete. I have no idea what he's talking about.
Of course you have an idea. Like, it's just nonsense. It's just being dishonest. Of course you know what he's talking about. He's talking about black people being superior. He said superior black race. What do you mean you don't know what he's talking about? He's talking about the superior fucking black race. Jesus.
Okay, I don't know what he's talking about. But it's always black and white. I see that only white people are calling him racist. He didn't say anything about white people.
This is just silly shit. This isn't logic, people. This is not logic.
Why are you attacking him? And it goes the same way, other way around. You know, white person says something, black people get mad at it. And I know black people are going to say too, because of the history. You know, I understand that. But me personally, if you watching my channel, you watching my videos, I don't have issue with it. You know why?
It ain't about you, man.
Because I don't have those kind of insecurities. I don't think I'm inferior to people. I do what I want to do. I get my money. I make my money the way I'm going to.
So he gives you the word inferior, and then he tries to define the word by, saying that he's a free man, right? Basically.
No one's stopping me from making my money.
But inferior doesn't mean that you're free. I mean, obviously, if you're a slave, then you're inferior. But inferiority doesn't imply that you're a slave. It just means that someone's better than you. And someone is always better than you or I at something. And we're always going to be better than somebody else at something else. It's just a fact of life. It's nature, right? We're not all beautiful or equally as beautiful. We're not all as tall. We're not all as smart. There's diversity and variety. And some people are superior in some ways and other people are inferior in other ways. But there's no one race that's superior, and that means that there are no inferior races. It just doesn't exist. You can't prove it. You have to, if you're going to make these statements, wouldn't you at the very least want to provide some evidence? But for every little piece of evidence that you think you're proposing, somebody is going to propose a counter piece of evidence, and it'll basically tell you what I've been saying, that we're all inferior and we're all superior as individuals to one another when it comes to different aspects of who we are. Our identity, which can only come from us and not a group, because identity starts with what?
All right, that's not gonna happen. You know, so all right, that's not gonna happen. No
What's
way
new?
around. You know, the history. You know, issue with it. You know why? Because I don't have those kind of insecurities. I don't think I'm inferior to people. I do what I want to do. I get my money. I make my money the way I'm gonna make it. No one's stopping me from making my money. All right, that's not gonna happen.
Money is very valuable, right? Obviously it is. But it is very important to him. He keeps repeating it, right? He said it earlier on in the video, and now he's saying it. You know, it's also how he measures success, I'm sure of it. And it's very, very tantamount to who he is, right? Money, 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 money. He keeps telling you this. What you're seeing here is value, however artificial, however inflated, replacing values.
You know, so that's the way I see it. You know, whatever you feel, whatever you say about your people, your background, whatever it is that you are, that's on you. That's how you feel. All right. I'm more like I think I'm focused on the individual. Okay. I can't speak for everyone.
Right? It's wonderful. It's just wonderful.
I can only speak for myself, and that's why I don't think this is a big deal. It's not. It's just another thing. You know, must be a slow week of news or something like that.
Okay. Not to beat a dead horse, man, but let me just close this out like this. You know, because of my past experiences with this individual here and his obvious disregard for truth and science and reason, right? And dialogue. I try to establish some kind of dialogue with him to parse it out, to get to the bottom of it, to come to an understanding, right? And he just rejected all that and just called me a racist, right? Because that's okay. That's okay to call people racist when a million times I must have said that there is no superior race. I've said this many, many times over that I don't believe in your racist ideologies, any of them. There is no superior race, right? But somehow I'm a racist. But somebody who gives you the definition of racism as their ideology is not a racist, right? This is complete and utter rejection of reality. It's a complete and utter rejection of reason, as you saw in many examples, and the confusion in this man. This is a complete and utter rejection of language as codified in the dictionary. And, you know, he does have a thesaurus, as you could tell at the bottom left of the screen. So he's probably, you know, familiar with, and obviously, I don't mean to be snide or cocky or whatever, or smart as, but he knows what the definition of racism is, but he promptly rejects it, right? Now, if you're making a video to communicate with people, if the goal is communication, how are you going to reject the definitions of words and create your own? That doesn't make any sense, right? Infinite numbers of solution to a problem. A word could mean whatever I want it to mean. This is the culture of Marxism and postmodernism, and it's a very, very, very dangerous ideology. Because he's completely rejecting all the values that Western society has been built upon. This same Western society that has afforded him the best life at least in our history, or what we know of who we have been on this planet, right? Maybe there were societies that had it better than us, and it just wasn't recorded or the history was lost. But from what we know, this guy specifically, and Americans in general, and Westerners, people living in Western civilization, reaping the benefits thereof, they have it better than anybody has ever had it on this planet, so far as we know, as a group, right? And yet somehow he's resentful. He resents the Western society because of what? A feeling? An ideology? Right? So he rejects the tenets on which the society that has afforded him the relative wealth that he possesses, he rejects all those tenets, like reason, science, right? Language. Not only does he reject the core values on which the society was built, he rejects the very language that was used to build this society, to facilitate communication. And he doesn't want to talk to you. I would have offered to talk to him and not make this video. I would have offered to speak with him about this and set him straight, right? Or get him to speak the truth. But I've tried that in the past, and he rejected me, and he just called me names, right? And insulted me. So I knew he wasn't going to do that. Probably has me blocked. I don't know. Doesn't matter. It's not important. That's why I'm doing this. Because this person, and he's just an example, a great example of a lot of different people out there who think exactly this way. Maybe not exactly, but they possess all these postmodernist, at least a portion of this postmodernist ideology. The truth is not important. You could think whatever you think, no matter how contradictory it is to what I believe, my truth. You have your truth, I have my truth, and a third person is going to have their truth, and we're all going to have our truths. Meaning there's no truth whatsoever, because you've diluted the meaning. The meaning of truth has been lost, and honestly, there can only really be one truth. That's the whole fucking point. It's probably in the definition. One solution, or the ultimate solution. But he rejects that. He rejects reason. He has rejected science in the past. He makes this statement of black superiority. He agrees with it, but he doesn't back it up with any evidence, because it's not necessary. Because if you feel a different way, that's fine with him, so his way should be fine with you. It's nonsense. It's fucking gibberish. It ain't about how you feel. It shouldn't be about how you feel, or whether it's bad or good, or whatever value judgment you put on it. It should be about truth. Is this a true statement? Of course it isn't. So this useful idiot here is, and that doesn't mean that he's stupid. He's just being used. But let me not get into conspiracy theories. But this is, look, conspiracy theories. There are people who wrote books. There's the Communist Manifesto. There's Das Kapital by Karl Marx, right? This is an ideology that came about, a couple of 100 years ago, and it's been around for and it's been described and created and molded and reconstructed. This shit exists, right? And it's manifested in these cultural Marxists like Boxing Wave, who don't recognize the the value of Western civilization that's afforded him, the best life he could possibly ever have. It's so good he would never change it. You know what I mean? Or exchange with anybody because it's so fucking good. He recognizes the benefits of Western society, but he doesn't understand where they come from, and that is Western society civilization, right? He doesn't respect the values of this society and civilization, and he rejects them, and he rejects the very language of this society because he doesn't want you to convince him that he's wrong, all because of how he feels. I'm sorry this has gone on so long, but this really is thick. This is deep. It goes way, way deep. And if you want to learn more about this stuff and how not to be like this, listen to what Dr. Peterson has to say when it comes to postmodernism. And I'm telling you, if your mind is not blown, it might as well just blow your brain, man, away. Blow yourself away. Blow your brains out. God damn it. Anyway, I'm a little bit rusty. This is way too fucking long. Look, if Boxing Wave wants to talk to me, I'm open to communicating. I'm open to debating this. I'm not saying that I got all this right. I make mistakes. I'm not perfect. I'm inferior to a lot of people in various ways also. But I'm willing and able to get to the bottom of this and use definitions, true definitions of words, and be honest and try to find the truth and a common ground where we could solve this problem. That's just me, because I'm an individual and I don't hold any fucking ideologies, at least not that I know of. So anytime, any place, man, you let me know. I don't mean to be misrepresenting what you're saying or any of that other stuff, but I think I've done a pretty good job of exposing how it's fucking nonsense. It's absolute nonsense, where it comes from, what it means, and how it's going to destroy this very person and everything that he has if it continues on like this, okay? This ain't really about, it ain't about Boxing Wave. He's just a great example of a cultural Marxist who seems to want to destroy Western civilization on some level, however conscious or not. So that's that. Thank you for listening.